All right, I'm sure a few more people will be joining us as we get started here, but let's go ahead and dive in. Thank you all for attending. I'm Kyle Silberbauer. I'm the CEO here at Atiim, and today we are going to be talking about how to manage OKRs at scale. So Atiim is an OKR management platform. We're software as a service. We help companies set, track, and manage OKRs to execute more effectively against their corporate strategy. And today we're going to be talking very practically about how to roll out an OKR program in practice in your organization. So here at Atiim, we work with typically with companies anywhere from 50 to 250 people, some larger, some smaller. But one of the biggest challenges is understanding how to take an OKR program where you understand it conceptually and actually put it into practice in your organization. And I hope it comes as no surprise to you all that as the CEO of a tech company focused on OKRs, I think that the best way to do many things at scale is by using software. So we're going to be diving into software, into the Atiim application itself at multiple points throughout this presentation. So we'll be going back and forth between the slides themselves and a demo environment in Atiim. And we're going to be walking through some practical use cases of using the Atiim software to facilitate common OKR lifecycle points in the OKR lifecycle. So stuff like planning, collaborating, tracking, that sort of thing. And before we get into all that too, we'll recap what the superpowers of OKRs are and how software helps to make them even more powerful and do it at scale. But before we get started, let's take a quick poll here, get some little bit of audience engagement to start, and also just see, what everybody's experience level is. So I'm launching this poll. You should see it on your screen right now, but I just would like to know what everybody's experience level with OKRs is. Like I said, this is going to be a very practical webinar, which means we're not going to be doing the OKR basics or OKR 101 type talk today. We're going to assume that you come with a little bit of knowledge of what OKRs are, even if you've never actually used them. So it's okay if you're not using them currently, but I do hope that everybody here has at least heard of OKRs. So we'll leave this poll open for another 10 or 15 seconds here. Looks like we have most people already voting though. Okay, let's close this up here. And that's great. So I see that it looks like we could share this on the screen real quick. We have a good mix here in the group so far. We have a lot of people with some experience, but they're still learning how to use them effectively, which is perfect. I think that's probably the best bucket to be in for this particular talk, because that's what we're going to be going over, is about how software makes an OKR program more effective throughout your organization. And I'm sure for people who are still exploring, or even for those who have been doing OKRs for a while now, you should get a few little maybe tips and tricks, or maybe be convinced that there are better ways to do things based on what you see today. So I think there's value for everybody who's attending. All right. So first of all, let's talk about how software unlocks those superpowers at scale. And more specifically, let's start by covering what those superpowers are. So these OKR superpowers are coming straight out of John Doerr's book, Measure What Matters. This came out last April, actually, and I'm sure a lot of you on the call have actually read this book. New York Times bestseller. It's very popular, especially for CEOs, executives in companies, leaders, and it's for good reason. John Doerr, he came out of Intel. He learned OKRs from Intel. He took those as a venture capitalist, and he brought them to Google after he invested in Google at the very early stages. And OKRs were a big reason why Google was so successful. And the book details a lot of other very successful companies that are using OKRs currently. And one of the big things here is that OKRs allow your company to unlock these 4 superpowers. I like to remember them by an acronym. You can either say FAST or FATS, whichever one you prefer. But the general idea is that OKRs help you focus. They align your company. They help you track what's going on and hold people accountable. And they can help you stretch for amazing. Numbers 1 through 3 there, so focus, alignment, and tracking, those are really facilitated by software. So software is really great at unlocking or supercharging those superpowers. For the fourth one, I'll be honest, it's a little bit more of a cultural thing within your company. So not every company is going to be comfortable setting really aspirational OKRs. Like Google is famous for having this kind of moonshot mentality, but it's not for every company. And I think until you've mastered the first three throughout your organization, it's probably better to focus on those ones. And then once you feel like you've mastered focus, alignment, and you can track from quarter to quarter really well, then maybe you'll be more comfortable giving your teams and individual employees a little bit more autonomy and allow them to stretch for some of these really aspirational objectives. But again, this is going to be a practical webinar. So I want to take it a step further than just talking about what these superpowers are. I want to specifically talk about how software unlocks them in practice. And the way to do that is by automating the OKR lifecycle within software. So we're going to cover 4 what I would call user stories throughout this presentation. So the first one is about how you could plan and align objectives at the start of a quarter or the start of a year. Then we'll move into what it looks like to collaborate and check in regularly on objectives. Third, we're going to talk about tracking, reporting, and course correcting. So this is how decision makers and executives within the company can keep the entire organization on track using OKRs. And then the fourth one here is about how software will allow you to iterate and improve on how effective your OKR program is over time. And then one thing to mention, sorry, but I should mention this at the start before we go any further, is just that if you do have questions, go ahead and leave them in GoToWebinar. You can submit the question now, but I'll leave some time at the end to cover questions. And if anybody has to jet out early, we will have a recording of this full webinar available for everybody that we will send out to you. So if you're in here right now, if you registered for the webinar, we will send that recording to you when it's all done. All right, so let's jump into this first user story, which is planning and alignment. So this is how you jumpstart the OKR program. And this applies both to the initial rollout. So if you're doing OKRs for the first time, this is really important. And this is also important every single quarter and every single year because OKR is a very iterative process. So one of the most frequent questions that I get from new customers is, how do we create alignment in our organization? Is this something that is dictated from the top down, where executives and senior leadership tell everybody what they should be working on? Or is this something where it's just a free-for-all, where from the bottom up, employees decide what they want to do and managers do the same, and then hopefully it all works out by the time you get all the way up to the top of the organization? I think, as you could sense from my tone here, neither one of these by themselves is going to work. You really want a mixture of both. It's a little bit, this is the realism that you can't dictate everything effectively from top down, and you also, for most organizations, you're not going to spontaneously create alignment by letting everybody just do whatever they want to do, focus on whatever they want to focus on. So we really like to start with a top-down approach to OKRs, where you take your corporate strategy at the executive level, at the senior leadership level. Maybe you take your strategic pillars or your mission statement or your vision or your long-term product roadmap, and you convert that into your top-level OKRs. And you work with your senior leadership team to connect what every department is doing to these top OKRs. But then you task your department heads, your middle management, with working with their teams to figure out how they can create objectives within their teams, within their departments, that align up to these bigger goals. So at this point, we're going to jump into that first user story. As I mentioned, we're going to jump over into the Atiim application itself. So walk through what this would look like in practice. So everybody should now see my Atiim demo environment, and I will offer a word of warning. I apologize beforehand if there's any glitches or if it's slow. If any of you guys work in tech, I'm sure you know that tech demos don't always go perfectly, but bear with me as we go through this. And here you see a screen in Atiim, which is very similar to what we were just looking at on the slides. So we basically, in this demo environment, taken those strategic pillars that were on the slides, and we've converted them into actual working software within Atiim. So for this user story, we're going to be taking the perspective, you'll see in the top right here, I'm signed in as Mary Martin. She is the VP of Marketing. So imagine Mary sitting in a QBR meeting, an executive planning meeting for the quarter, and they're going over what they want to accomplish for Q3. And the CEO says, okay, well, one of our big things we want to focus on is growing the business. And what I mean by that specifically is we want to hit 30 million in sales, and we also want to improve the product and specifically grow upsells based on a better product. So the CEO gets all the senior leadership on the same page about why grow the business is so important at the top corporate level. And talking with Josh in sales and Priyanka, who's the VP of product, they decide that these are the two biggest contributions to that top corporate objective. And then the CEO turns to Mary and says, Mary, what are you working on right now? And how are you going to contribute to this? How are you going to align with this objective? And Mary jumps over and she says, okay, well, let's take a look at my team objectives right now. We were planning on, we knew we had to help the sales team hit the revenue target. And obviously, if hitting 30 million in sales is a major contribution to our top corporate objective of growing the business, maybe it makes sense for us to focus on that one. So we can go in here directly from the software, and we have this little alignment tool. We could say, let's find that sales. I think it was Josh's goal. Yep, there's 30 million sales. And right from here, Mary, the VP of Marketing, can cross-functionally align her objective directly to the sales department. And so now, if we were to jump back here, look at top corporate, we can see this hierarchy being created within the organization that reflects what's important this quarter and how the different teams within the organizations align. So grow the business, 30 million in sales, help the sales team hit revenue target. So we have some cross-functional alignment here from marketing to sales into the top corporate objective. So that's the top-down planning that might happen at the executive level. But then later, Mary would want to go in and talk to her middle management about how each of their teams are going to contribute to this. So I'm just flipping over to another view within Atiim. We call this our OKR Explorer here, Objective Explorer. And so again, still signed in as Mary. She's looking through her teams. Okay, we have some marketing goals. This is the help sales team hit the revenue target that we just saw. Let's maybe talk to Paula. So this is one of Mary's direct reports, and we could talk to Paula about how she's contributing. So Paula is in charge of SEO and ads, and Paula has talked with her team about trying to improve their ads and organic search, and she's probably talked with Mary too as her manager about why that might be important. And based on these discussions that are going up and down the hierarchy of the organization, and like we just saw, they could also be crossing the different functional silos too to help break down those silos. Paula and Mary can determine, all right, this is a great goal. Improve ads and organic search, perfect. Mary and Paula come up with some very quantifiable key results that will determine whether or not they've achieved that. Maybe they even say, hey, we need some help from Dan Brown on one of these key results because he's a product manager in charge of the design team. And we might need to coordinate with him to effectively launch a marketing campaign for a major product release or something like that. So again, you can see some of this cross-functional alignment happening even at the key result level. And once again, we can now align from the bottom up and say, let's find that marketing objective to help the sales team hit the revenue target. Perfect. That marketing objective for Mary, my manager, or Paula's manager, I should say. We save that alignment. And you can see it right here. Now, Paula is aligned up into her manager, Mary. And if we jump back into that alignment chart, we can see exactly how this works. Alignment throughout the organization. Paula is a middle manager in the marketing team. She's going to improve ads and organic search, which will help the sales team hit the revenue target. That's obviously going to contribute to the 30 million in sales that sales needs in order to grow the business. So we've got that top-down and bottom-up alignment. It's helped getting everybody on the same page and making sure that what this company is working on at every single level is ultimately contributing to the overall corporate strategy. I'm going to jump back over to these slides real quick now. So that was the planning and alignment use case, or user story, if you will. Now the next step is, okay, you've got everything planned. You've got this beautiful hierarchy of objectives throughout the organization. That's great, but it's very static. Now you actually need to execute. Now you need to connect activity to results. And the important thing here to remember too is that your executives don't accomplish all the objectives on their own. Management does not accomplish objectives on their own. It takes a concerted effort from the entire team, and planning is just step one here. So really what we have to do is connect daily activity to OKRs. And the way to do that is with collaboration and check-ins that engage employees, and again, do so at scale. Here's a little quote from Andy Grove at Intel. He's kind of the grandfather of OKRs. Andy Grove is who John Doerr learned OKRs from. And Andy Grove is here talking specifically about OKRs when he says the key is to set and check in on the goals frequently. So it's not just enough to have the goals written down. You need your OKRs to become a living, breathing part of your organization. You want to create a culture of responsibility, of collaboration, of accountability, and ultimately of caring about what goes on, not just in your team, but beyond that, in your department, in your company as a whole. And this is something that's actually not totally unique to OKRs either. So there's a lot of studies. We have one on the right there from Gallup, but like Harvard Business School has done studies. Many other publications have done studies on how to more effectively engage employees. And one of the things that commonly comes up is that having very clear, transparent, focused objectives are a really powerful way to create engagement, because it connects employees to the larger organizational mission. And of course, there's also other studies that show that the more engaged your employees are, the higher performing they are, and ultimately the better performing a business is in general. Not to mention that they're just happier and there's less attrition overall. So regardless of OKRs, engagement itself is really powerful for every organization. So, creating a culture of engagement, a culture of conversations and feedback and recognition is really crucial. But it becomes a superpower when you couple it with OKRs. And so John Doerr actually spent the latter half of Measure What Matters talking about CFRs, conversations, feedback, and recognition, as a way to supercharge OKRs, because this is what creates engagement. This is what keeps OKRs top of mind for employees. It's what helps employees every week, every quarter, tie the work that they're doing back into what's important for the company, and feel like they're really making a difference here. And it's also an opportunity for managers to provide coaching and feedback to better develop employees, and to course correct and to help them improve over time. I also happen to think that software really, really helps here. In fact, I think this is the area where software helps the most and where scale becomes most important, because probably the biggest things that when new customers come to us, the biggest thing they struggle with is getting people to care, getting people engaged, getting people to check in on OKRs. Because if they're not checking in, if they're not providing timely, accurate updates on the status of key results, the OKRs aren't really going to matter. You're not going to be able to course correct in real time and get things back on track. So software is great because it helps build the habit within the organization. It helps create or facilitate that organizational behavioral change and drive adoption of OKRs. And it does that in a few ways. So first of all, with software, you can have dedicated workflows that were purpose-built for OKRs, which of course we've done in Atiim. We've built a user experience that's really simple, that removes a lot of friction from the check-in process, from the reporting process, for employees and for managers. And of course, you could do things like notifications that push updates and push reminders into the flow of work. It pushes it to where the employees are already working, so that when an employee has to do a weekly check-in, they're reminded of it in the flow of work, and it doesn't become this thing where you have to have another browser tab open just to be tracking OKRs every single day of the week. You'll get a push notification at the end of the week when you need to check in. An employee goes in there for 15 minutes, sees just the most relevant things they need to check in on, and can perform those check-ins, provide that feedback to their manager, and vice versa. The manager can provide feedback and coaching to the employee. It also again, facilitates that focus because we can build a workflow that just shows employees and managers what matters to them in the moment, what is most critical. And then finally, from a more retrospective perspective, it helps to aggregate all this data in one place. So if you're going to do annual performance reviews at the end of the year, it's really great that you have this running record of all the conversations, all the feedback, all the collaboration that was going on within your organization. It's a great point of reference for your managers. And of course, you also have a record of the OKRs that employees were working on, which helps make those annual performance reviews very objective because the managers can reflect back on concrete things that happened throughout the year. With that, I'm going to switch back one more time into the Atiim application, and we're going to walk through this next user story around collaboration and feedback and checking in. So again, this is kind of the CFRs that John Doerr talked about. So we see here again still Mary Martin, and this is what a weekly check-in looks like in Atiim. So most companies do them weekly, some companies like bi-weekly or maybe a different cadence. But in general, it's good to check in every week. You see here you can perform check-ins on the status of OKRs. So Mary's VP of marketing, she reports into the CEO. She can update her marketing quarterly objectives. She could provide notes to her boss on what's going on. Some of these objectives are driven purely by contributions, and she can look through this and say, okay, let's see. Oh yeah, I remember I was talking to Will, and Will said XYZ about this, so she could pass that information up along to her manager, the CEO. And then there's also an area here where the managers can specify some free-form questions to ask every week. Here at Atiim, we like to ask, do you have any blockers? Or we might create a question like, who helped you out the most in the week? Create a little bit of positivity, team spirit by creating custom free-form questions to ask every week. And it's as simple as that. 15 minutes, maybe less. Mary updates all of her OKRs, provides a few notes to her manager, and she just hits next and submits it. And then of course Mary is also a manager herself, so she can look back on last week and say, okay, let's see. I got a report here for Paula Finley. So Paula was the employee who had she was the online ads and SEO manager who had that objective we were aligning a little bit earlier. And we can see here, Mary can see everything that Paula's working on. So it looks like last week, not much progress here, and maybe she could flag that for a follow-up. She could, if it was something that was going well, she could leave a good job, provide that recognition. Of course, leave comments, like any updates here, things like that. So it's all it's conversations, it's the feedback, it's the collaboration between employee and manager. And then we also have some other features that facilitate collaboration. These are more, we have features like this, which are more 360 collaboration. This is kind of from employee to employee, from team member to team member, and even cross-functionally, where you can leave comments on OKRs, you can like progress check-ins of a teammate, things like that. So that we have in Atiim, we perform both these one-on-one feedback loops that are closed loop between manager and employee, and we facilitate the 360 feedback loops between team members, even across teams. And the important thing with all of this is, again, we've built the workflows around it that make it really easy for employees to know when they have something. They'll get notified when there's something that they need to attend to. And we really streamline and help employees focus on just what's most important so that they're not just overwhelmed with more information. Employees don't need just another productivity app in their life. They really just need that quick connection every week to what's going on within their team, within their department, within their organization, to feel engaged and to understand how they fit in to the bigger picture. So that was the collaboration and check-in user story there. Now we move on to the third step here. So we've talked about planning and alignment. We've talked about how software can facilitate collaboration and check-ins. And now, how do you know whether your team is executing? How do you know whether your organization is executing? Because ultimately, we do all this alignment, we create all this engagement in order to drive organizational execution against the company strategy. And so from an executive level, from a CEO level, from a decision maker level, how do you know that OKRs are actually effective? Well, of course, you want tracking and reporting. and you want that tracking and reporting to be pre-built, so you don't have to configure reports every time you want a new one. You want it to be very robust in the sense that you can slice and dice the data. You have different querying and filtering capabilities. You can look at different levels, whether it's corporate, team, or personal levels. You can drill down into things. You could step back and get a big picture overview of what's happening. And I think most importantly here, you want it to be very actionable. So a big thing I always talk to our product team about is whenever we're going to do a new visualization, a new export, or a new way to provide decision makers with data, let's make sure that we're helping them make decisions and not just overwhelming them. In the same sense that employees are overwhelmed with the number of things they have to do every day or every week just to get their job done, and you don't want to add on to that by making a really complex performance management system they have to attend to. For decision makers, there's so much data in the organization. And one of the reasons, that first superpower was focus and committing to priorities. So the focus and the priorities, that's really important. And so we want to make sure that the data that we provide in Atiim is very focused and very actionable, so that if a decision maker sees that something is off track or falling behind, they could course correct, and they can do that before the end of the quarter, before the end of the year, when there's still time to adjust and still time to get the team or the department back on track and towards meeting these strategic objectives. And that will lead us into our final user story here, which is actually one of my favorites. This is one that we do every single week. You know, like as a CEO of a software company, this is one that I really appreciate. And it's the ability to look at the entire company and to quickly pinpoint where I could be most helpful for the week ahead. So we call this the Monday morning report. It's something that I typically recommend all senior leaders within our customers. They should do this once a week, whether it's a quick 15-minute check-in or whether it's an hour-long meeting where you get all of your department heads involved. It's just important to start the week strong by understanding what's on track, what's off track, and where do we need to take action to course correct. So again, we're going to take this perspective of Mary Martin, the VP of Marketing, and let's keep it simple. Let's just look through our department and see what's at risk and behind right now. So you saw me filter down to just see if there are a lot of objectives here, but right now I just want to do a quick check-in to see where I need to maybe provide some coaching or remove roadblocks, remove bottlenecks, maybe reallocate some resources. So the first thing I see here is that overall we had a few objectives, but only 2 are behind, so that's good. And here's that one from Paula Finley, actually. So this was the one that we were aligning earlier, and we noticed it's actually behind right now. So it's not too far behind. You see in Atiim, we provide this expected progress value of 3%, and it's at 1% right now. We're still within the first month of the quarter, so it's probably not a huge deal yet, but it could be worth just checking in. And the first thing I might do is, as Mary, is say, okay, well, why is it behind? Let's just look at these key results. And you see, like overall, we have one here that's 7%. It's in the green, but by and large, they're all at 0%, and most of them are owned by Paula Finley. So, you know, maybe I want to drill down and say, okay, well, what's Paula working on? Let's just go to Paula's people details page and understand what's going on. Well, she has one objective. That's not bad. That seems like she's pretty focused. But what does stand out here is that she owns a ton of key results. So these are all her key results on the left here. These are the objectives that those key results contribute to. As you can see here, some of them are her objective, but she's also helping out Anthony a lot. And so as Paula's manager, maybe this is an opportunity for me to either postpone projects, cancel them, put somebody else on them. If I've identified that Paula right now is struggling to meet the objectives that we saw were so critical, again, this improve ads and organic search objective, that goes all the way up to the top corporate level. So maybe this is something where I do need to take action and reassign Paula to different tasks or give some of her key results to other people. And of course, if I didn't remember as Mary what the impact was, I could also look upstream to see what those impacts are, or maybe I should say downstream, but look up the alignment chart to see what the impacts are. And that's when I realized, oh wow, if Paula does end up falling behind on this objective, this goes all the way up to the very top, grow the business objective. So it could be a much bigger issue than And Paula realizes because obviously with marketing cycles and sales cycles, if sales really does need to hit 30 million in revenue for this quarter and Paula hasn't made much progress yet, we might need to take action immediately to make sure that we don't miss this grow the business objective. So it's this sort of diagnosis of problems. It's really great when you're using software. You don't have to build these visualizations, and the visualizations become interactive. They become actionable, and they help managers understand what's going on and course correct. And this was more of like the visualizations for alignment and the impacts of OKRs falling off track. We also within Atiim had visualizations for engagement too, because like I said, the alignment is coupled with the engagement is really critical for execution. And so we have, for instance, what we call the engagement report, which shows how teams are checking in over time. So here we're actually looking at last quarter for the entire company. And you could see that there's been steady improvement over the course of last quarter, where the on-time check-ins are increasing and the review rate of, well, in this case, it's the CEO. The CEO is becoming more engaged too. He's reviewing more and more of these check-ins every single week throughout last quarter. So you could see right there where the engagement's at. And you'd also look down and see like which departments, which managers aren't engaged as much. For instance, let's see here, Mary Martin. Not doing great. This is actually just because it's dummy data within our demo environment. We normally do all the check-ins with Josh, the VP of sales here. So Josh is doing better. He's got a team check-in rate of 62%, and he's reviewing 38% of them. So that probably needs to come up a little bit. And if I was the CEO, I might coach Josh, about the importance of feedback, the importance of recognition, the importance of having those conversations with your employee, and the advantages of doing so in Atiim, because that's going to create a record that Josh can then use at the end of the year during the performance review cycles. All right, and that was our final little user story here within the application. But there's one final thing I want to cover here before we jump into the Q&A portion, and that is improvement. This is the end of the OKR lifecycle. And remember, when I'm talking about this lifecycle, this is a quarterly thing that repeats over and over again. It's an annual thing that repeats over and over again. OKRs are meant to be a really agile process. That's the difference between strategy and OKRs, because OKRs sit in between day-to-day, week-to-week execution and quarter-to-quarter, year-to-year strategy and long-term vision. They make that connection and they drive the execution against the strategy. And so it's really important that well, first of all, it's important that everybody here on the call understands that you're not going to be perfect at OKRs when you first try it. That's one of the big things that we always have to reassure customers about, especially customers who weren't doing OKRs before trying Atiim, is that it's an improvement process. It's meant to be agile, and part of being agile means that you're going to make some mistakes, but you're intended to learn from those mistakes and get better over time. And you're not going to unlock all the superpowers the very first quarter you try to use OKRs. So constant improvement is key. And the way software helps here is that, again, we have all that historical data. We can see the trends over time. As we just saw, we were looking at the levels of engagement across the organization for Q2 2019, so for last quarter. And so we saw that progress over time, and then we were able to pinpoint some managers and some teams who were struggling still. And then we can have those coaching conversations to improve the situation so that next quarter is better than the previous quarter. But one thing I will really emphasize here is that in order to do OKRs effectively, you absolutely need buy-in from leadership, from upper management. And it's going to be very, very tough if your CEO doesn't care to review check-ins or your CEO isn't engaged in planning and aligning OKRs. It's going to be really tough if your department heads aren't engaged in that to get the buy-in throughout the organization, because engagement starts up top. It starts with leadership, and OKRs are a business process change, and so they need that strategic vision, that strategic guidance from the top. And then one final point here, the third bullet point, is that I think it's an underrated aspect of software is the human element that Atiim provides, the customer success. So we're, as a software company, we've worked with hundreds and hundreds of customers on setting up, implementing, rolling out their OKR program. And that means we've just got a wealth of real world experience on what works, what doesn't work. Some things that might not be OKRs by the book, but are still very effective at creating execution for the company. And our customer success managers can provide that insight and provide those tips and tricks and best practices, because we've seen it over and over and over again, because we've helped a lot of companies go through the same thing. So that is the entire OKR lifecycle. And again, the reason we were covering all that, let me just jump back to recap here real quick, is because we're trying to unlock the OKR superpowers that John Doerr mentioned. So focus, alignment, tracking for accountability, and stretching for amazing. So with the focus, it starts at the top. It starts with your senior leadership, taking the strategy and boiling it down to the most important objectives for the quarter. It starts with getting all of the department heads focused on what matters to the company and how they can help. And it continues with the alignment throughout the organization, both from top down and bottom up. It then moves into the actual check-in phase, the collaboration, the regular weekly check-ins, the conversations, feedback, and recognition that are happening between employees and managers and within teams. And that's where software has notifications and workflows and really streamlined views for employees, so that the friction is just reduced as much as possible for them, and it encourages them to actually participate in the process. And then finally, as that's happening throughout the quarter, we have all this tracking and reporting that allows managers to course correct and ultimately track what's going on, hold people accountable, coach them, help keep things on track, remove bottlenecks, that sort of thing. And that starts when you have all three of those. It starts creating this iteration improvement that will lead ultimately to teams that perform more effectively on their own, and maybe then you can switch into more of these moonshot, stretch for amazing type aspirational objectives. So again, it's this OKR life cycle, which you practice again and again, quarter to quarter, improving along the way, that really unlocks these OKR superpowers in practice. And it's a huge bonus. I don't know if any of you guys are using something like Excel or Word documents in order to track your OKRs right now, but I'm sure some of the things I've touched on so far, you've noticed pain points within your own organization when it comes to, oh man, we have a lot of Excel spreadsheets and it's hard to track all these. It's hard to create reports from these, or it's hard to turn those reports into actionable reports where we can actually course correct with them. Or, we're struggling with engagement. Our employees don't really care. They don't know what's going on. We're trying to post these PowerPoint decks of what our OKRs are, but nobody's really checking in week to week on how they're contributing to them. Or maybe the alignment process, the planning process is really a struggle. And for those of you who are experiencing this, that's where software comes in to help make this more effective at scale. All right. Well, thank you guys. We're at the end here. If any of you guys have any questions, again, I know that there's been questions piling up as I've been talking so far, so we'll get to those in just a second. But as a reminder, we will be emailing all of you a recording of this webinar after it's done. And if you would like to see a demo of the Atiim software, if you have follow-up questions about OKRs in general that we don't get to address today, feel free to email hello@atiim.com and we can help you out. So thank you all for attending, for taking the time out of your day, and now we'll jump into questions. So the first question that I got, someone was asking, basically, how do you launch OKRs in a fast-growing business, one that is maybe overwhelmed with a ton of work going on? Maybe you're a rapidly scaling startup. It seems like you don't have time to talk about strategy because you're so busy with execution. Maybe, and the question might be, do you just jump into it and go for it, or do you need to be a little bit more cautious and meticulous about planning the program? And how do you free up people to have more time to even bother with OKRs? Well, as I mentioned, executive buy-in is critical. Leadership buy-in, I think, is the most critical component. And so if leadership doesn't think it's important, can't make time for OKRs, and I mean make time. I mean spend time planning OKRs, spend time aligning them, actually checking in on OKRs, talking to your team about OKRs. It's never going to be successful. This doesn't necessarily mean that you need to have this from the CEO level on down, although I would recommend that. But we have worked with a number of companies where there's maybe a VP, a department lead, or a middle manager who wanted to do OKRs, and they just did them with their department or with their team. But it was important that it was the leader of the department or the leader of the team that was starting this OKR journey and was making the time for connecting day-to-day execution to the strategy of the team or the department. Because without that connection from the leadership on down, you're just never going to get the engagement at the employee level. And so it'll probably turn into a waste of time. Again, if leadership can't make time for it, it's going to be really tough expecting employees to make time for it. Okay, got some questions here. Just going to go through here and find some interesting ones. Where would you recommend to get additional training development on how to best create OKRs? I would say that there are a ton of great resources on the internet, as for most things. Atiim has a bunch of resources. Actually, you can go to atiim.com. We have like things such as an executive book summary of Measure What Matters. You can see our blog there where we have a lot of tips and tricks. There's OKR consultants, of course, who can help you out, which we work with a lot of them. So again, if you do have any questions about this sort of thing, I would say the starting point is check out our website, check out our blog, or just email us at hello@atiim.com. And you can connect directly with one of our salespeople, and they can help you out, because we really do take our job seriously as trusted advisors and making sure that before we try to sell you software, that you have all the information you need to be successful. So we think of ourselves as trusted advisors for OKRs first and foremost, and software salesmen second. All right, let's see. And then there's also a question about how is Atiim different from Workboard, and I think that maybe just in general, how does Atiim compare to other OKR platforms? Obviously, I gave this talk by showing demonstrations with an Atiim. There are, of course, a lot of different OKR platforms out there. We all have our strengths and weaknesses. I would recommend you check out a website like okr-software.com/compare. There's a few other like this where you can compare the pros and cons of different pieces of software. For instance, with Atiim, we really focus on alignment and engagement, which I touched on during this talk. The alignment of creating this hierarchy of OKRs, getting all the different teams connected. We have really powerful tools for that, and of course for tracking, reporting on those alignments. And then engagement, which is the weekly check-in, but it's all centered around OKRs themselves. I know that other tools might focus more heavily on integrations, which is, you could do like key result integrations that pull in data from other outside systems. We don't like that as much at Atiim because it tends to eat away at the engagement. When things are just automated, employees no longer really care. Plus, it's kind of a hassle from an administrative standpoint to maintain all of these integrations. So we prefer to create the engagement and have employees connected to what they're checking in on. But yeah, there's different strengths and weaknesses like that, where some products focus on more integrations, some maybe are more task management oriented products. We are very much alignment plus engagement in order to drive execution against strategy. So we're really this strategic alignment and engagement tool. But go ahead and check out something like okr-software.com/compare if you'd like more information. Let's see, we got a few more here. Okay, here's a great one. I like this question a lot. We get it very frequently. How do you recommend to manage smaller tasks while an OKR only focuses on 3 to 4 key results or limited tasks? So that's great. This is maybe one of the biggest questions that we get. It's also probably the biggest area where I see companies struggling. OKRs are not task management. OKRs are bigger picture than that. They're also not long-term strategies. So on the other end of the spectrum, you don't want to be setting OKRs for 3 years in the future, because it's going to be very hard to measure those. But they're definitely not task management. but they're connected to tasks. So I like to think of it as, tasks are kind of the foundation. They're everybody doing their day job. But the next level up there would be the key results, which are the business outcomes you're trying to create by doing all that work. So I put key results into two main buckets. You have output-based key results and outcome-based key results. And you probably want to mix of both, but an output-based key result might be something like release X feature in Q3. And progress on that output-based key result is going to be driven by maybe work that's going on in Jira or in another task manager. And so you don't want to track all those tasks inside of Atiim because you start losing that focus. But you can have this output-based key result that's just maybe tracking the major milestones along the way of that project. So if you guys are familiar with like agile development or something, maybe you have an epic in Jira associated with this big project, and the progress on that epic would be mapped to the progress of an output-based key result. The second type of key result is that outcome-based key result. I think these are actually more important and more powerful. Outcomes are things like improve our conversion rate by 15%. What's really important in outcome-based key results, and why I think they're really great, but also kind of an advanced use of OKRs, is that you're focusing on a business outcome. You are really taking a step beyond day-to-day tasks, beyond day-to-day work, and looking at the level of how do we make this business better. And so something like improve conversion rate by 15%. There's a lot of different ways you can accomplish that. And so if you're telling your team that their key result is improving conversion rates by 15%, you're inherently trusting them to figure out the best way to approach that. And you, as a manager, you might be, brainstorming with them exactly what tasks they should be doing to accomplish that. It doesn't mean the team does it all on their own. But the point is that you've created more leeway and more focus on the outcome that matters rather than dictating every single micromanagement step along the way that needs to happen in order to deliver on that key result and potentially deliver the objective. And that's really powerful. It's if you can get there as an organization, I think that's really what you strive for with OKRs, is to be very outcome focused and not so task and output focused. Very long-winded answer, but I think it's an interesting topic, and there's definitely more I could say about that, and we have some stuff on our blog about it, but it's a great question. All right, let's see. We still have a few more questions. Again, guys, feel free to drop off whenever. We'll send you out this recording when we're all done. Let's see. Some of the questions are a little bit longer. Oh, so this question is basically asking, even with software like Atiim, do you need some sort of program manager to actually run the OKR system within your company? For that, I would say in most cases, yes. This is typically what we see. Almost all of our customers, certainly the ones who are successful, have some sort of OKR program manager embedded within their company. Now, some of them do hire a third-party consultant to do that. Obviously, you're going to pay for that. Some of them try not to do anything. I think it's fine for smaller companies. Maybe if you're on the smaller end of that, like 50 to 250 spectrum, if you're like 50 people, you might be able to get away with just building a culture of OKRs, especially if you have that leadership buy-in. But even with leadership buy-in, especially at bigger companies, it does tend to go much more smoothly if you have some sort of program manager, or maybe multiple. You could delegate some of that responsibility to maybe each department head or to certain project managers within the company. But it is something where until you've built this business process into your company culture, it's going to be something that's a little bit foreign. And part of the iteration and improvement process is that you want somebody who holds people accountable and reminds people from time to time, hey, you're not engaged. Hey, I see in the engagement report that your managers aren't reviewing reports. You should talk to them about that. So that's why we provide this reporting, is specifically for those admins, not just the senior leadership. All right, these are all great questions, guys. Thank you. Let's see, I have one here. I'm not sure exactly what it means. How do you get sales and marketing specifically to align on OKRs that are dependent on each other? Alignment's a complex thing. In that first example, I was talking about the scenario to imagine is some sort of QBR or senior leadership meeting. I think there's going to be meetings. You can't avoid meetings, but the point is to spend a lot of those upfront meetings talking about where you're going, and then letting the teams figure out how to get there. So again, not being that's the top down and the bottom up mindset. Senior leadership at sales and marketing level, have your department heads jump into a QBR with your CEO, figure out what's most important in the company for this quarter, for this year, how each department contributes to that, and then let them disseminate the individual projects, tasks, the lower level objectives to their teams individually. It definitely is a collaborative process, though. Again, that's why we've built in these collaborative tools within Atiim, not only between the employee and the manager, but also for teams themselves to collaborate on OKRs. All right. Is it necessary to bring projects that may not have a direct impact in right away, but taking a good share of employees' time for a particular quarter? Yeah, so I think what this is getting at is that you will set, OKRs do not cover all the work that is getting done in the quarter. This is very, very, very critical. Again, focus was the number one thing. Focus is also the first thing that people lose. It's so easy to get lost in the weeds of execution, in the weeds of every other thing that's going on in your company, and you lose focus. OKRs are a chance to get that focus back, to reset those priorities to what really matters for the business. And that's why it's so critical to think about it strategically first and then project second. So think about strategy first and then project second. You will have lots of projects going on within your organization every week, every quarter, every year. Not all of those will be tracked or even mentioned within an OKR. The important thing is, though, that you sit down beginning of every quarter, beginning of every year, and think about those big objectives you want to accomplish as a company. Talk about that with your department heads, disseminate that on down, and make sure everybody understands what's most important to focus on, so that when you do see one of these big projects that are being tracked as OKRs going off track, you can reprioritize everybody and say, hey, I know we're all working on a lot of stuff, but remember we committed to, grow the business as the most important objective for this quarter. Let's focus on, and then you show them the alignment chart and say, hey, this is what sales is doing, this is what marketing is doing, this is what the ads and SEO team is doing. We need everybody in this line of work to focus on this and maybe drop some of the other projects. Again, you could start removing some bottlenecks, removing some roadblocks for the teams. But yeah, you're not going to track everything in OKRs. You're not going to track everything in Atiim. And it's not advised that you do that either. It's a good thing. Focus is a good thing. A couple questions about like implementation partners and consultants. Yeah, we have them all over the world. We work with a number of OKR consultants, teachers, coaches. So go ahead and like I said, if you shoot an email over to hello@atiim.com or request a demo on our website, we'll connect you with a salesperson. They can provide you with all that information. All right, I think I covered everything here. If I missed one of your questions, hello@Atiim, go ahead and send an email there. We'd be happy to answer it in person. But otherwise, thank you all again for attending the webinar. I really love seeing this engagement at the end with lots of great questions. So I hope you guys are all excited about OKRs. They're a really powerful tool. It's been demonstrated time and again, starting at Intel, then Google, and Measure What Matters has a bunch of other great companies as case studies. We got a bunch of case studies on our website, but this really is a transformative tool for businesses. And if you want to do it at scale, if you're 50 or more people, really even 25 or 30 people, it's going to be hard to get everybody aligned and engaged just from the CEO talking to people every single week. So you really do need a thoughtful methodology for it, and software can really help. So I hope you guys all got something valuable out of this, and thank you for your time.